Hi, please like and subscribe to this channel, as well as comment so I can build a community of resistance fighters based on the snarky irreverence I display in my videos. Here is part 2, a continuation of the contrast between Stephen Miller's speech and Joseph Goebbels' speech. And as we left off yesterday, we'll start with the Hitler campaign speech from July 21st, 1932, which reflects in theme and content with the Joseph Goebbels speech, which we will get to at the end here. My name is Scott Schneider. Thank you for joining me. This is Fed Up in Minnesota.
Presently sending a final update to the onboard computers for antenna management. And we have a go for auto sequence start. And we have auto sequence start. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ihr könnt euch von diesen 13 Jahren nicht frei liegen und ihr könnt euch nicht frei schwindeln. Ihr habt die Verantwortung angefangen vom Tag der Revolution bis jetzt. Und Sie wissen auch, dass wenn diese Verantwortung auf Ihnen bleibt.
Obviously trying to blame everybody else for the economic conditions that wasn't anybody's fault but Germany's in the first place, because they're the ones who waged World War I and then put themselves into that ruin and destruction. And then all the economic problems that came after 1929 were the result of the crash. The stock market crash in America, not anything Germany was doing or any of the coalition parties.
Und Sie wissen auch, dass wenn diese Verantwortung auf Ihnen bleibt, dass dann das Urteil der Nation ein hartes sein wird. Sie wissen, dass in diesen 13 Jahren es Ihnen nicht gelungen ist, auch nur einen einzigen Stand für sich zu gewinnen. Nicht eine Lebensschicht der deutschen Nation kann wirklich sagen, wir haben durch dieses 13-jährige Regiment gewonnen. Die Nation im Gesamten aber kann nur feststellen, Defizite in politischer, in moralischer und sogar in wirtschaftlicher Hinsicht. Was sie in den 13 Jahren angriffen, schlug ihnen fehl. Alles misslang, alles brachte das Gegenteil. Sie müssen heute zugeben, dass noch niemals in einer so kurzen Frist so viel zerstört worden ist, als in diesen kaum ein Dutzend Jahren. Wenn wir Nationalsozialisten nun als Gegner diesem System gegenübertreten, dann unterscheidet uns zunächst etwas von diesen anderen Parteien. Diese anderen Parteien sind, wie sie selber zugeben, Vertretungen des Handarbeiters, des Mittelstandes, des Bauern, der Angestellten, der Beamten, der Katholiken, der Protestanten, der Hausbesitzer, der Mieter und so weiter. 27 solche Gebilde treten auch jetzt wieder auf. Und wir können dem gegenüber sagen, wir sind nicht eine Partei eines Berufes oder Standes, nicht eine Partei einer Profession. Und wenn meine politischen Gegner heute aufstehen und sagen, wir Nationalsozialisten seien intransigent, wir seien unfriedlich. Ja, wenn ein deutsch-nationaler Führer gegen mich den Vorwurf erhebt, ich wollte nicht dulden, dass auch andere Bewegungen und Parteien in Deutschland existieren, dann kann ich diesen Vorwurf vor der deutschen Geschichte ruhig auf mich nehmen. Ich kann nur sagen, jawohl, es ist mein Lebensziel, diese 30 Parteien zu vernichten und auszurotten.
Total destruction of free speech and freedom of political thought. Right on display, right out loud. Sound familiar?
Soll einmal die Zukunft dann urteilen, wer nationaler gehandelt behandelt hat. Diejenigen, die 30 Parteien ins Leben riefen und auf Kosten der deutschen Nation ihr Unwesen treiben ließen, oder derjenige, der sie beseitigt hat.
Oh, it will be, it will be.
Was ihnen nicht gelang, weil sie nicht wollten, dass es gelingen sollte, ist uns schon heute gelungen. Aus allen deutschen Lebensschichten haben wir die Menschen zusammengefasst. Arbeiter, Proleten vielleicht, bürgerliche Bauern und alle aus ihnen eine Gemeinschaft gebildet, die hart ist und hart werden wird. Eine Gemeinschaft, die damit aber vor allem die deutsche Kraft aus dem inneren Kampf erlöst und diese Kraft wieder in die Waagschale unseres deutschen Lebens und Ringens nach außen werfen wird. Sie können von heute diese Entwicklung vielleicht mit ihren Lügen und Verleumdungen übergießen, beseitigen können sie sie nicht. Und wenn die Gegner selbst sagen, dass wir jetzt am Ende dieser Entwicklung angekommen seien, sie
Sadly, they did not eliminate it.
beseitigen können sie sie nicht. Und wenn die Gegner selbst sagen, dass wir jetzt am Ende dieser Entwicklung angekommen seien, sie täuschen sich. Wir sind jünger als der Herr Severin, Braun und Grzezinski und Kaas und Genossen. Wir sind jünger und vor allem...
I believe here he is quoting all of the chancellors that have either resigned or have been reappointed over the last, I believe, at this point would have been the last 6 or 7 years, since I think 1925, when President von Hindenburg was elected.
Wir sind härter und sind entschlossener. Das Ziel, das wir uns gestellt haben, werden wir verfolgen bis ins Grab hinein.
Now, before we go looking into Goebbels' speech, a little primer on, again, a little bit more on how the German government worked. For those of you who may not be familiar with the structure of German government, the chancellor is the person who actively projects power and runs the government in the country, much like the prime minister does in another country. And the president serves as a figurehead, only making decisions when necessary. And this is set up by the Weimar Republic, circa 1918. You're going to hear in the speech a reference from Goebbels to the creation of that constitution after World War I was ended by the Allies, and the Treaty of Versailles was signed, and there was actually a sort of actual violent revolution to take the Germany out of the Second Reich and put them into the Weimar Republic. And that Second Reich is what all of the German conservatives, including Hitler and all of his allies, wanted to take Germany back into. 1,000-year reign they called the Third Reich. The Second Reich was ruled by King Prussia and ended in the World War I being waged upon Europe, and Germany being one of the sparks that basically started that war and then caused the destruction of that country. Now, prime ministers are usually elected by members of a majority parliamentary party or by a coalition of majority parties, but the Chancellor of Germany is appointed by the president. The German government during the Weimar Republic was composed of two houses, the major house being the Reichstag, the other house being the Reichsrat. The Reichstag's kind of like our own Senate. Basically, the formative things are completed and accomplished, and there's basically gridlock and debate, and it's kind of the last pass-through, at least up until Donald Trump took over and the pee-or-pants Republicans now rule both houses. The Reichsrat was like our house, but unlike our house, the Reichsrat was kind of more of a performative, formal political house that kind of did things, made ceremonial policies, and etc., but didn't really do anything that important. The Reichstag was considered the centralized government, and the Chancellor ran the Reichstag and helped direct its actions. So, that being the central hub of their parliamentary government. Now, the Reichstag during the 1920s and early 30s was again made up of the coalition of multiple parties, with the majority party always having a thin margin of rule, and it just didn't really lend toward them resolving any issues. Everybody is infighting, and there wasn't anything that was majorly able to be passed to make the reforms that really helped Germany overcome all of the issues that came from the fallout from World War I. Now, these conservatives eventually made up the Nazi Party and were part of the movement of the Nazi Party, largely influenced the leadership of the government, and belonged to the German National People's Party. Now, that is a separate party from what the Nazi Party started out as. In 1925, Paul von Hindenburg of the German National People's Party was elected president of the German government. Now, he's a conservative, but was not a Nazi. He remained president from 1925 to 1934, and thus appointed the German chancellors. Hindenburg, as the president, went through 7 chancellors due to all the crises that Germany faced as a republic. 5 of these chancellors were appointed from 1928 to 1933, and subsequently 4 resigned. As this went on, Hitler's and the Nazi Party began regaining seats each year as he took advantage of the dissatisfaction with the economic conditions. The German National People's Party held the leadership positions in the parliament in 1933 by a slim majority because they were tired of not being able to exercise majority power and gain unity over the gridlocked Reichstag. President Hindenburg appointed Hitler chancellor to unite the conservatives and the Nazi parties together, because they didn't want the left-wing parties to rule, and unfortunately, that was the end of Germany at that time. And Hindenburg miscalculated Hitler's intentions and what he was going to do with Germany. And during that same time, a provision in the Weimar Republic called Article 48 that allowed the president of Germany to create an emergency decree whenever he thought so or felt like it, began to be used more and more heavily toward the elections of 1932 and into 1933. And as that became habitually used by the German coalition government and the powers that were gathering, Hitler took advantage of that Article 48 to create a presidential emergency decree after the Reichstag fire to dissolve the German government. Here again is an overview. Historically, all these parties was called the Grand Coalition, and it involved, starting in June 1928, Hermann Miller, who was then president, Hermann Miller, who was the then chancellor at that time, created the Grand Coalition to rule Germany, and that was made up of the SPD, DDP, DVP, and the Center Party. That's what Hitler was referring to in his glorious speech there. I mean, I'm using glorious, of course, in a sarcastic tone. And all the political parties came together. Then the Wall Street crash hit. And then Hindenburg was right-wing and therefore disliked having the left SPD in power. That was the Social Democratic Party. He refused Miller's request to use Article 48 to restore stability, to help with stabilizing the government regarding unemployment benefits. And then Miller resigned as a result. And then Heinrich Brüning was his successor, appointed by Hindenburg. And Brüning was the one who continued to use Article 48. And then that basically sort of boiled over into Hitler's regime, and he used it. as the economic crisis worsened, and then we had Ben von Patten and von Schleicher. And that was another guy, Van Patten, replaced Broding, who that didn't work out and because of unemployment. And Hindenburg actually demanded his resignation, but it was just a mess. Even though the Nazi Party achieved status in the 1932 July elections, the coalition still was a mess. And so in November 1932, Van Papen, again, who actually was in cahoots with the conservative elite, thought that there was the need for an authoritarian leader. And he called for another election in November 1932. And then everybody didn't gain votes or gained a few votes. Following von Papen's failure, Hitler was off the chancellorship there once. But without the right to rule by presidential decree, he refused, and von Schleicher became chancellor. And then von Schleicher couldn't get anything done, so he resigned. Then Hindenburg finally caved and gave Hitler the possibility of having more rule of the government, and then Hitler took that to town. My apologies for bringing empty promises, but I think this video has gone on a little long, so we'll have to end part 2 here. But we have definitely set up the stage and the scene, and we have explained the background of me. The next video I post will be Goebbels' speech. And I'll maybe throw in another goodie there on top of that. This is Scott Schneider. I am fed up in Minnesota.